The terrorists cut the lights to hunt the hostages. Fatal mistake. They didn't make the room dark. They made it his playground. Now, the blind man isn't the victim. He is the predator. The lobby of the Rialto Theater smelled of stale popcorn, lemon floor wax, and the dusty velvet of the past. For most people, it was just a rundown cinema on the edge of town. But for Elias, it was a symphony of vibrations. He stood by the ticket booth, his fingers lightly grazing the braille on his watch. He didn't need eyes to see the world. He constructed it through a sonar map of clicks, shuffles, and breaths. He knew Mrs. Higgins was approaching the counter before she even opened her purse because her left knee clicked with a specific rhythmic cadence. He knew little Leo was trying to sneak into the PG-13 movie because the boy's sneakers squeaked with the hesitation of guilt. Elias was a fixture here, a quiet, harmless old man in a frayed vest who tore tickets with trembling hands. To the patrons, he was part of the furniture. Teenagers would wave their hands in front of his dark sunglasses, giggling when he didn't react, unaware that he could hear the fabric of their sleeves rustling and the accelerated beat of their hearts. He was the poor old blind guy. "Here's your ticket, Leo," Elias whispered, smiling as he extended the stub exactly toward the boy's hand. "And try not to spill the soda this time. The sticky floor messes with the acoustics." Leo laughed, grabbed the ticket, and ran inside. Elias sighed, leaning back against the booth. He loved the peace of the matinee shift. The low hum of the projector, the muffled dialogue bleeding through the heavy doors, the distant sirens of the city that usually stayed far away. It was a simple life, a retirement he had fought hard to earn. He adjusted his dark glasses, listening to the gentle rhythm of the afternoon. He looked weak. He looked defenseless. It was exactly the camouflage he had perfected over 30 years. But the air pressure in the lobby was shifting. The heavy front doors swung open, not with the casual swing of a customer, but with the synchronized silent precision of predators. Elias froze. The piece was over. The atmosphere shattered in a single heartbeat. It wasn't just noise. It was a physical wave of violence that slammed into the theater. The front glass didn't break. It disintegrated under the force of a breaching charge that Elias felt in his molars before he heard the boom. Smoke grenades hissed across the linoleum, spewing thick, acrid gray clouds that blinded the few people lingering in the lobby. Screams erupted, high-pitched, primal terrors that bounced off the high ceilings. But Elias didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. While others scrambled in visual chaos, Elias stood rooted, his head tilted slightly to the side, processing the data. Nobody move. Down on the ground now. The voice was deep, accented, and projected with military authority. Elias counted the footsteps. Thud-click. Thud-click. Heavy tactical boots. Hard rubber soles on marble. 1, 2, 4. No, 5. 5 hostiles. They were moving in a diamond formation, sweeping the room. He heard the distinct mechanical clackslide of automatic rifles being chambered. Kalashnikovs, modified. These weren't common robbers looking for the cash register. These were professionals. They herded the lobby patrons toward the main theater hall, shoving them with the barrels of their guns. A young woman near the concession stand was crying, her breath hitching in panic. A heavy hand struck her. The sound of flesh hitting flesh echoed sickeningly, and she fell silent. Into the hall. Everyone. The leader barked. Elias felt a gloved hand grab the collar of his vest. He was yanked forward, his cane clattering to the floor. "Move, Grandpa," a voice sneered close to his ear. Elias stumbled, feigning a frailty that was only half fake. He allowed himself to be dragged into the main auditorium, where the movie was still playing. The screen flickered with bright colors, casting long, erratic shadows, but the terror was auditory. The assailants fired 3 shots into the ceiling. Crack, 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 pulverizing the plaster and sending dust raining down on the terrifying audience. The music stopped. The screams intensified. The gunmen secured the exits, locking the doors with heavy chains. They were trapped. And then the leader made a mistake. To incite total fear, he cut the main power breaker. The screen went black. The emergency lights failed. The theater plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. The darkness was heavy, a crushing weight that panicked the 50 hostages huddled between the rows of seats. Children were sobbing into their parents' coats. Adults were hyperventilating. To them, the blackout was the end. It was the removal of their primary sense, leaving them helpless against the armed monsters pacing the aisles. But for Elias, the darkness was a homecoming. He was crouched near the back row, his knees pressed against the sticky floor. His heart rate, which should have been hammering against his ribs, began to slow down. Thump, thump, thump. He reached into his pocket, his fingers bypassing his wallet and finding a small, smooth object, a challenge coin, worn smooth by decades of worry. It was a relic from a unit that didn't officially exist. His trembling stopped. The act was over. In this pitch black, the playing field hadn't just leveled, it had tilted violently in his favor. He closed his eyes behind his sunglasses, shutting out the distraction of the visual memory, and opened his mind to the room. The theater was a vast acoustic chamber. The velvet curtains dampened the high frequencies. The wooden floorboards acted as conductors. He could hear the leader at the front, near the screen. The man was pacing, his breathing rhythmic but slightly labored, likely a smoker. He could hear the second gunman near the left exit, shifting his weight from left foot to right foot every 12 seconds. Boredom. Discipline slipping. Elias had a choice. He could stay curled in a ball, playing the blind geriatric, and hope the police negotiations worked. But he heard something else. A whimper. Row 4, Seat B. It was Leo. The boy's asthma was flaring up. The wheezing was a high-pitched whistle in the dark. If the terrorists got annoyed by the noise, they would silence it. Elias gripped the coin so hard it bit into his palm. He wasn't a ticket taker anymore. The file labeled Subject 0, the man who could navigate a minefield by the sound of the wind on the trigger wires, was reactivated. The eyes behind the dark glasses went cold. Elias stood up. He didn't leap into action like an action hero. He rose slowly, shakily, the picture of a confused, terrified old man. He tapped the back of the seat in front of him, making a deliberate, clumsy noise. "Hey!" A gunman shouted from the right aisle. "Sit down." Elias ignored the command, shuffling into the aisle. He held his hands out, waving them pathetically in the void. "Please," he wailed, his voice cracking with a perfect pitch of senile fear. "I can't see. Where is my cane? I need my medicine." He was making himself a target, a nuisance. It was the Trojan horse strategy. Present a threat so pathetic that the enemy lowers their guard. "Sit down, old man, or I will put you down." The footsteps approached. Heavy, aggressive strides. The gunman was closing the distance, annoyed rather than tactical. Elias calibrated the distance. 15 feet. 10 feet. He could hear the fabric of the gunman's tactical vest rubbing against his shirt. He could smell the gun oil and the stale tobacco on the man's breath. I just need my pills," Elias stammered, drifting slightly to the left, positioning himself near a heavy velvet curtain. The gunman laughed, a cruel, wet sound in the dark. "You won't need pills where you're going." The mercenary reached out, grabbing Elias's shoulder to shove him back. This was the moment of contact. The mercenary expected resistance from a frail body, a skeleton of brittle bones. He expected Elias to crumble. He didn't expect the man he touched to feel like a coil of steel cable under high tension. Elias didn't pull away. He leaned into the grab, his hand drifting up, not to beg, but to locate the position of the man's larynx. The breathing pattern told Elias exactly where the throat was exposed. "Please," Elias whispered, but the tone had changed. It was no longer the plea of a victim. It was the icy confirmation of an executioner. "You're standing on my floor." The gunman barely had time to register the change in Elias's voice before the world turned upside down. Elias didn't use strength. He used physics and anatomy. As the mercenary pushed, Elias pivoted on his heel, trapping the man's wrist against his chest. With a sharp, fluid motion, he drove his free palm upward. He didn't aim for the face. He aimed for the sound of the breath. Crack. The strike connected perfectly with the gunman's windpipe. It wasn't a movie punch. It was a sickening, wet crunch of cartilage. The mercenary couldn't scream. He could only gurgle as his airway collapsed. Before the man could drop his rifle, Elias stripped it from his hands, feeling the familiar weight of the weapon. He didn't fire it. That would be too loud, too chaotic. Instead, he used the rifle stock, swinging it in a tight arc that connected with the mercenary's temple. The man crumpled to the floor, unconscious before he hit the carpet. A gasp rippled through the nearby hostages. They couldn't see what happened, but they heard the brutal efficiency of it. The shuffle thud of the takedown was unlike anything they had ever heard. "Marco?" The leader called out from the stage, using a code name. "Status." Elias knelt by the fallen body. He quickly patted down the vest, locating a radio and a combat knife. He took the earpiece and clipped it on, listening to the chatter. Then he stood up. "Marco is sleeping," Elias said into the darkness. His voice wasn't the trembling whisper of the ticket-taker anymore. It was deep, resonant, and terrifyingly calm. It projected across the theater hall. "Who is this?" the leader demanded, panic spiking in his voice. "Turn on the flashlights. Find him." Beams of tactical light sliced through the darkness, sweeping the aisles frantically. But Elias was already gone. He had moved instantly after speaking, sliding between the rows of seats with the silence of a predator. He wasn't hiding from them. He was hunting them. The patrons watched in awe as the blind old man moved like a shadow, disappearing into the blackness that he owned. The tactical lights were chaotic, darting erratically across the velvet seats and terrified faces of the hostages. The terrorists were spooked. They had lost a man to a ghost, and now they were firing blindly at shadows. Bullets tore into the upholstery, sending clouds of stuffing into the air. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" the leader screamed. "You're wasting ammo. Group up. Backs to the stage." Elias used the chaos to move. He wasn't heading for the exit. He was heading for the most vulnerable group of hostages. He crawled on his belly, sliding under the seats, feeling the gum and discarded candy wrappers. He reached the row where Leo and the other children were huddled. "Leo," Elias whispered. The boy jumped, but Elias placed a calming hand on his ankle. "It's me. Listen carefully. I need you to be my eyes for a second. How many lights do you see?" "F4, Leo stammered, his voice trembling. "They are all on the stage." "Good," Elias whispered. "I'm going to make a noise over by the left exit. When I do, I want you to guide everyone to the projection booth stairs. You know the way. Counting steps just like we practiced for the fire drill. Can you do that?" "Yes," Leo sniffled. Elias squeezed the boy's ankle. "Brave boy." Elias melted back into the shadows. He needed to barricade the innocents before he could finish the fight. He made his way to the far left wall, finding the heavy fire extinguisher cabinet. He didn't open it. He smashed the glass with the butt of the stolen rifle. The sound was explosive in the tense silence. There, left side, the terrorists spun around, unleashing a hail of gunfire at the sound. While they wasted magazines on a fire extinguisher, Leo and the group of 20 hostages scurried low along the ground, slipping through the side door toward the projection booth. Elias listened to their footsteps fading. The innocents were safe for now. Now it was just him and the 4 remaining wolves. He clicked the radio transmit button 3 times, a dead man's rhythm. He was taunting them. The terrorists were clustered on the stage now, their flashlights creating a perimeter of light. They were terrified of the dark, terrified of the space beyond their beams. Elias was in the balcony now, looking down, or rather listening down at them. He had the high ground. He realized the civilians in the projection booth were safe, but they were loud. He could hear them crying, shifting. If he could hear them, the leader would hear them soon. He needed to teach the room a lesson in silence. Elias found the manual controls for the theater's old sound system. He didn't turn on the lights. He turned on the audio. He cranked the bass to the maximum level and engaged a feedback loop. A low, vibrating hum began to fill the room. It wasn't loud yet, just a pressure in the ears. It disoriented the terrorists on stage. They looked around, confused. "Stop moving," Elias's voice came over the theater's PA system. He had wired his stolen radio into the announcer's mic. If you breathe, I hear it. If your heart beats too fast, I hear it. The darkness is my ally. It is your prison. The psychological warfare was working. One of the gunmen, younger than the others, started to hyperventilate. Elias could hear the rapid, shallow gasps. You, Elias said, his voice booming from everywhere and nowhere. The one on the left. Your breathing is ragged. You're scared. Bang. Elias fired a single shot from the balcony. He didn't need a scope. He aimed at the sound of the hyperventilation. The bullet struck the floor inches from the young gunman's boot. It wasn't a kill shot. It was a warning. I missed on purpose, Elias lied smoothly. Next time I won't. Drop your weapons. He was buying time. He was teaching the kids in the booth that silence was survival, and teaching the enemy that noise was death. He was controlling the environment, turning the theater into a weapon. But he knew the leader wouldn't break that easily. The leader signaled his men. They were preparing to storm the projection booth. They had figured out where the hostages went. I know you're up there, the leader shouted, pointing his weapon toward the balcony. And I know the hostages are in the booth. Come down or we burn them out. The leader pulled a flare from his vest and cracked it. The red light bathed the theater in a hellish glow. He wound his arm back, ready to throw the flare into the projection booth window, which was lined with old flammable film reels. Elias froze. He couldn't take the shot. The angle was bad, and if he missed, the flare would ignite the room instantly. He had to expose himself. He had to trade his position for their safety. Don't! Elias yelled, standing up in the balcony, silhouetted against the faint exit sign. I'm here. Fire! The leader screamed. 3 rifles turned upward. Elias vaulted over the railing, not falling, but jumping toward the heavy velvet curtains that flanked the screen. He caught the fabric, sliding down in a controlled friction burn, just as bullets chewed up the wood where he had been standing. He hit the stage floor hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Pain shot through his old knees, a sharp reminder of his age. He was exposed now. He was on the stage with them. Hold fire, the leader commanded. He wanted the kill to be personal. He's unarmed now. Look at him. Just a blind old bat. Elias stood up slowly, dusting off his vest. He stood in the center of their circle, surrounded by 3 armed men. He held his hands up empty. Let the children go, Elias said, his voice steady. You want me. I'm the one who took out your man. I'm the one humiliating you. Let them go and I'm yours. The leader sneered, stepping closer, the heat of the flare sizzling in his hand. I think I'll kill them. And then I'll kill you slowly. Elias lowered his head. He was offering himself as bait, drawing them in close. He needed them within arm's reach. He needed them to underestimate him one last time. Then you leave me no choice, he whispered. Outside, the sirens were finally screaming. The SWAT team was at the doors, but they couldn't breach without risking the hostages. They needed an opening. Inside, on the stage, the tension snapped. The leader lunged with the flare. Elias didn't retreat. He stepped into the heat. He grabbed the leader's wrist, twisting it violently until the flare dropped to the floor, rolling harmlessly away. Now, Elias shouted, though he had no radio to the police. He was shouting to the universe. As the other 2 gunmen raised their rifles to execute him, the front doors of the theater exploded inward. The police had used a thermal charge. The sudden change in air pressure confused the terrorists for a split second. Elias dropped to a crouch, sweeping the leader's legs out from under him. As the leader fell, Elias used him as a human shield. The other gunmen hesitated. They couldn't shoot their boss. That hesitation was all Elias needed. He snatched the pistol from the leader's holster. He couldn't see the gunmen, but he could hear the distinct click of their safety switches being toggled. Click. Bang. Click. Bang. 2 shots. Double tap. Elias fired at the sounds of the metallic clicks. The 2 standing gunmen dropped, clutching their shoulders and legs. Elias wasn't aiming to kill. He was aiming to neutralize. The leader, pinned under Elias's knee, struggled to reach for a knife. Elias pressed the hot barrel of the pistol against the man's neck. "Don't," Elias growled. "I can hear your pulse speeding up. I know you're about to move. Don't make me finish this." The leader froze. "Police! Drop it! Drop the weapon!" Flashlights flooded the stage. SWAT officers swarmed the platform, rifles trained on Elias. He slowly raised his hands, the pistol dangling from one finger. Blood trickled down his forehead from the fall, but he stood tall. He looked toward the officers, or rather, his ears tracked their heavy boots. "Secure," Elias said calmly. "Hostages in the booth. 4 hostiles down. 1 secure." The aftermath was a blur of blue lights and paramedics. Leo and the other hostages were escorted out, weeping and hugging their families. They looked around for the ticket taker, the hero who had guided them, but the police had cordoned off the area. Inside the command truck, the police captain was staring at a digital file on his tablet. The file was heavily redacted, black lines covering almost every paragraph. The photo showed a much younger man, Elias, wearing a military beret and tactical gear, standing next to a sonar dish. "Captain, who is he?" a rookie officer asked, watching Elias sit on the bumper of an ambulance, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. "He says he's just a ticket taker." The captain swiped to the bottom of the file. "Project Echo. Status: retired/deep cover. Specialization: echolocation and non-visual combat." "He's not a ticket taker," the captain murmured, closing the file. "He's a weapon we forgot we had." The captain walked over to Elias. "The State Department is on the phone, Elias. They want to know how a blind man took down a mercenary squad." Elias adjusted his sunglasses, turning his head toward the sound of the captain's voice. "I didn't see anything, Captain. It was dark. I just got lucky." The captain smiled sadly. "Right. Lucky." Elias stood up. "Can I go? I have a shift tomorrow. Someone has to tear the tickets." "The theater is a crime scene, Elias. Take a vacation." Elias tapped his cane on the pavement, the sound sharp and clear in the night air. "Vacations are too quiet. I prefer the noise." He turned and walked away, tapping his cane, disappearing into the crowd of onlookers. The people parted for him, not out of pity this time, but out of a strange instinctive respect. They didn't know who he really was. They just knew that the sleeping lion had woken up, roared, and went back to sleep. And the Rialto Theater would never be just a cinema again.